want to do that?
No, perfect.
Yeah. I was just gonna stay like super low.
Sounds good.
Good evening and welcome to St. Peter's, especially if this is your first time with us, a especially warm welcome to you. If you're joining us again after having been away perhaps for a while, or if you are one of those who week after week sits in these pews and enjoys this music and this time for a little bit of a pause and some prayer, you know what a wonderful gift Jazz Vespers at St. Peter's is, not only to ourselves, but really to this city that we love. A tradition dating back here at St. Peter's into the 1960s, 1965. In fact, next year, 2025, marks the 60th anniversary of Jazz Vespers, and we'll be particularly excited to celebrate this extraordinary tradition here at St. Peter's. Vespers is sort of a very old church rite that comes from a time before we told time using clocks, when we were really paying attention to the world around us. Much like now, as the sun has set, people, as that would happen, just gather to mark that setting sun with praying Vespers. And sometimes, like now, it happens at 5 o'clock. Other times of the year, it happens at 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. We kind of long for those days, don't we? But here we are in the midst of this period where our days are short and our nights are long, and we gather at 5 for Vespers and light a candle really in our midst. I'll go to the altar in a moment and light the one that's here, and we know that those of you who are joining us via our live stream, perhaps you might have a candle nearby and could light one too. There are all sorts of ways in which you could talk about the meaning of that candle from a very practical perspective. You know, how else would you see before the electric light if you didn't light a candle? It's also a presence of God in our midst. It's also a moment of hospitality. When people come to our homes, we often light candles as a symbol of welcome. So with all of those things in our minds and in our hearts, I'll light the candle here. And again, those of you who might be at home and have a candle nearby, I encourage you to light it. And perhaps say at home what I'll say here as I light our Vesper candle: God's light shines. Light of justice, light of eternal love. Let my prayer rise before you as incense, O Lord. The lifting up of my hands, the lifting up of our hands, as night descends. O Lord, we call out to you, come to us quickly, hear our voice when we cry to you. Set a watch before our mouths, guard the door of our lips, let not our hearts incline to any evil thing. Let us not be occupied in the wickedness of those who would do evil. But instead, O Lord, turn our eyes to you. For it is in you that we take refuge. It is in you that we have life. It is in you that we see each other. Let our prayer rise before you as incense, O Lord, the lifting up of our hands as night descends. Let the incense of our prayer ascend before you, O God, and let your loving kindness descend upon us, that with hearts turned outward toward one another, we might both sing and do your praise with all those here on earth and with the whole heavenly hosts, glorifying your name forever and ever.
Let me just say welcome, everyone. The first piece we played is a piece of mine called Traveling Through. We're going to continue now with a Coltrane piece named Lonnie's Lament. And I'll introduce the guys a little bit later. Lonnie's Lament.
This is a reading from John's Gospel. Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Did you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So, you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this reason I was born, and for this reason I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice."
In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. No heaven, no earth, no nothing. In the beginning, in the beginning, in the beginning, God. No mountains, no valleys, no main street, no back alleys, no night, no day, no bills to pay, no glory, no gloom, no poverty, no Cadillacs, no sand traps, no mud packs, no pedestrians, no carriage trade, no bodyguards, no credit cards, no conference calls, no TV commercials, no headaches, no aspirin, no heroes, no zeros, no naughty, no nice, no limit, no budget, no bottom, no topless, no cows, no bulls, no barracuda, no buffalo, no birds, no bees, no Beatles, no symphony, no jive, no Gemini 5, no 10, 9, 6, or 8, no men trying to fill an inside straight, no applause, no critique, no amateur, no professional, no questions, no answers, no singers, no dancers, no varied and sundry, ranting and raging, hither and yon, from pillar to pot. No heaven, no earth, no nothing. In the beginning, in the beginning, in the beginning, God.
So this bit of St. John's Gospel that we hear this evening is from part of the longest series of events as they are told in John's Gospel about Jesus' death or capture by the Roman army and then ultimate death at the hands of the Roman army. And we're sort of right in the middle of it when he is dragged in front of the local Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. And Pilate is, as the story is told, is confronted with a bit of a problem because, of course, Pilate is the most unpopular person in Jerusalem. Could you imagine living under occupation and you are the governor, the local embodiment of the mighty Roman Empire, and you have to deal with a guy like Jesus who has been walking around the countryside talking about a different way of living, a way of living of freedom, a way of living of justice and honor and goodness and might, and you're the one who embodies the very opposite. This is trouble for Pontius Pilate, and so we meet him in this moment of quite an extraordinary back and forth with Jesus, and as you read this little bit and you read the rest of it, you begin to wonder, are these two even speaking to one another, or are they speaking beyond one another? And of course, that is, in a sense, really the nature of the gospel itself. Most of the literature that we call gospel, that is to say, Mark and Matthew and Luke, have a dramatically different context than John's gospel. It is true, by the time John's gospel is written, it could be as late as the year 120. Long gone has been Jerusalem itself and the temple there, destroyed by the Romans in the year 70 of the Common Era. And so just think about that. If you take 70 and you take 120 as the outer date, that's a 50-year gap. In life expectancies then, most likely, this wasn't the generation that went through the destruction of the temple, but a later generation. And not only that, John's gospel doesn't come from Jerusalem at all. It's from another part of Asia Minor. And so as you imagine this, the story is telling this narrative of Jesus, presumably at about 30 of the Common Era, and we're all the way at 120. That's a long time in between. The context has changed. What's the one thing that remains in common? The all-prevailing nature of the Roman Empire. The local community that John's gospel was written to was a community of, you could say, Jewish Christians or Christian Jews. These were people who gathered at their local synagogue for Shabbat and observed the Sabbath, and then also came together on Sunday, on the so-called Lord's Day, and gathered with one another. And that was perfectly fine for a long time. And it was, it wasn't just simply, an idea of tolerance. This is the way life was. But something, we don't know exactly what happened, something happened, and that arrangement came to an end. And either that group of people was either thrown out of the synagogue, pressure got so high that they had to leave the synagogue, or they chose, something happened, but absolute fissure. And that wasn't necessarily a religious fissure in the way we think of Christians and Jews and Muslims and Buddhists as we do today. This was a fissure of family. These were families who literally did this with one another, or part of it with one another. And when that break happened, not only did they find themselves separated on Friday, on Saturday, on Sunday, they found themselves separated every day of the week. Fathers who wouldn't talk to their sons or their daughters, or aunts who wouldn't talk to their nephews or their nieces. It was an absolute fissure of society. And again, we don't know what caused it, but as I hear the way in which John tells the story of maybe 100 or so years before, reflecting on Pontius Pilate and the dynamics that unfolded in Jerusalem, again, a century before, I've begun to wonder, as I've pondered that, is the author of John's gospel telling us something about the nature of power in our world? Because the one thing that is the through line from the very beginning, through all the various communities, and then by the time we get John's gospel itself, is that power of the almighty empire. Maybe some of you have seen Gladiator 2. I haven't seen it yet. I'm really anxious to go see it. But there, or if you walk up to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, or if you open up your history books, you know the power of the Roman army to divide. And it was very clever about how it did it. Of course, it did it with amazing might and ferocity, and a lot of blood was spilled. I'm told that that is not a spoiler of Gladiator. We expect that, right? But Roman imperial power didn't just end there. It didn't end with the large battles. It didn't end with the Roman army going in and destroying Jerusalem, or quite frankly, any other part of its empire to make its power. I think the thing that made the Roman Empire so insidious was its capacity somehow to do precisely what it did to John's gospel, the community of John's gospel. That community, which otherwise was so integrated, families, society, the minority within a minority within a minority of a society where no one who went to synagogue or to the gathered on the Lord's Day had any sort of power. The insidious thing that the Roman army and the Roman military and the Roman imperial power did was its capacity to divide everyday people like you and me. That was 2,000 years ago. And we can track through human history times where that very thing has happened. It may even, perhaps it is likely happening even in our midst. Many of us might sit at Thanksgiving tables later this week with families where certain topics, if they emerge, will literally end the conversation. If you read on in John's gospel, this community that experienced extraordinary division, this community that saw family relationships and friend relationships and relationships that were the bedrock of the society split in two, this community later starts to point to different ways of being. Yes, surely they had some sort of argument, but later the community said, maybe we need in our arguments to adopt a spirit of generosity toward those we are talking with. Later, literature, even people who wrote in the name of John, we have them in we have some very brief pieces of literature that are much later in the part of the Christian Bible. And there's talking about this amazing power of loving even your enemy. Imagine that. Imagine love toward Pontius Pilate. But that community said very powerfully that perhaps that brings about a different result. I don't have the answers. If any of us had the answers to the fracture that we're seeing going on around us, we would all be much better. But I've got to think that the ways of love, the ways of generosity, the ways of seeking to understand, the ways in which we can have patience with one another, all these things that take, honestly, sometimes a great deal of work, they might be a more fruitful way forward. Certainly, I don't know about you, but I'm sort of tired of living with the kinds of division and divisiveness that we have seen emerging. So perhaps John and his community, in the very arc of their being, which again spans more than a century of a lifetime, might have something to say to us even today. Perhaps we can affect, I think, what John's community was trying to do but didn't succeed at doing, which was to bring healing to the world, to bring healing to a community, to bring people together. I can tell you at least that is what St. Peter's has been committed to doing now since this community really began back in 1862, but most certainly in the time that it's been here at 54th Street and Lexington Avenue. We don't ask when people come in the door what your political leanings are. We don't ask where you came from, whether you're documented or undocumented. We don't ask about your gender identity or your sexual orientation. We don't ask any of that because God doesn't ask that question. God instead is drawing us together in the midst of the powers of this world to be one human family. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be a part of it, and I'm grateful that you are, in whatever way you are here this evening, part of that too. Because if there is anything that can come from our gathering this night, if there is anything that can come from the witness of the oneness that is possible in the human family from a place like St. Peter's, from a city like New York, it might, in fact, do what that community had hoped more than 2,000 years ago it could do, which is that the oneness of a community might be presented in front of people all different sorts as a way of healing the human family, healing the nations, healing each and every single one of us. And I know no better a way to begin that than to pause and to pray as we have done this night. And we'll perhaps put voice to some of the longings of our hearts in prayer in a moment. I will go to the altar and I'll offer a few words of prayer for the world, for the city, for people in need. And I invite you to take them to your heart and perhaps even add your own. However you pray this night, know that God hears us. Revive in us, O God, a humanity that reflects the love, justice, and kinship of your kingdom of grace and mercy. Nourish parched lands and bring relief to flooded places. Protect wildlife habitats and endangered species, that the chorus of creation's praise might resound again with joy. Advance your reign of justice-seeking love through the work of all who govern, legislate, and deliberate on our behalf. Guide leaders of the world to end conflicts in the Middle East, in Ukraine and Russia, in Myanmar, in Sudan, in Haiti. Draw near to those who are wrongly detained, on trial, or incarcerated, those who seek asylum or adjustment to their immigration status. Nourish all who are hungry, connect those who are isolated, and surround all who experience physical or spiritual illness. Bless all who travel this week for Thanksgiving. Make homecomings joyful. Where there is division, bring understanding. Where there is sorrow, bring comfort. We pray on Thanksgiving for all those who have gone before us and are at rest, particularly those we remember in our hearts now. Keep us in communion with them and with Mary, Mother of God, and all your saints, until we gather at your heavenly banquet, which has no end.
The piece we heard before this is from the Duke Ellington Sacred Concerts book. Duke Ellington performed 3 sacred concerts, and we did a little excerpt from the very first part of the first sacred concert. That was done in 1965, and it's called In the Beginning, God. And my beautiful wife read the text. We can have a little applause for her. Very nice job. And I want to say, while I have the opportunity, what tremendous, wonderful work goes on here. Pastor Gensel started this Jazz Vespers back in 1965. I became aware of it in the early 70s. And I would come and hang out as a young musician, and he started it because the musicians would play into the wee hours of the morning. They could never make a service, so he started the 5 o'clock thing. And you'd come here, and he'd have all-night jam sessions sometimes, all-night soul, and it was a place to come. And if you look behind those panels, there'd be a room that size that was just filled with musicians, their spouses, food, laughter, instruments. It was a wonderful thing. And it's wonderful to keep it going and have it here. And I, for one, am very honored to be asked to play here. I guess this is a good time to introduce the bass player. It's Phil Sawar. And guitar is Jack DeSalvo. My name is Rocco John Iacovone. And we're going to continue with another piece I wrote called Freedom Theme.
My name is Vince Carn. I'm the director of music here at St. Peter's. Thank you so much for joining us for Jazz Vespers and for supporting this live music made by these incredible musicians. Can we give another round of applause? Rocco, John Iacovone, Jack DeSalvo, and Phil Sirois. Thank you guys. And remember to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages to watch your favorite performances again. As always, we have Hot House and Jazz record issues in the back. This is our last week for the November issue, so please take as many as you like. And also, if you're not on our mailing list, please join our mailing list by signing the sign-in book there in the back. If this was an enriching experience for you, I would encourage you to contribute to Jazz Vespers. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can scan our QR code here. You can also donate cash or check as you leave today. 100% tax deductible. And now speaking also about our bulletin here, we really encourage you to take a look. As the old song goes, it is indeed the most wonderful time of the year. And we have a jam-packed December. So we encourage you to come back for all these amazing events, including, as always, our superb Jazz Vespers every Sunday. which next week will feature a Billy Strayhorn tribute, which is particularly special with our Billy Strayhorn piano here. So thank you again so much for coming and supporting Jazz Vespers.
Okay, I'm going to say one more thing. We're going to continue with a piece called Indigo Joe, and then there'll be some good nights, and we're going to finish with something called a contrafact, which is a song that's written over the harmonies of another song. So we're going to hear what is this thing called love, and we're going to hear something that my mentor Lee Konitz wrote, which is called Subconscious Lee. But first, we're going to start with Indigo Joe, and thank you all.
As you go forth from this place this night, go forth with the blessing of the one who brings light and life to all creation. But especially this night, go forth and be that light in this world. Thanks be to God.